Hey guys, so in today's Vlogmas video, I was originally planning on just filming kind of a generic on my shelf video, and then I thought, you know what, let's put a spin on it. So today I'm going to be sharing with you guys all of the poetry on my shelves. So I have said before in videos that I am not a poetry person, whatever that means. Basically, I don't gravitate towards poetry. It's not something I really think about picking up often, though I do read it occasionally. And I think when it comes down to it, I was really scared off poetry in school when I was definitely taught that it is something to be analyzed, to be dissected, and to be understood, not just experienced. So what I want to do today is just kind of talk you guys through the poetry on my shelves, and I'm kind of going to organize it by when in my life I encountered this poetry so that maybe we can get a more full picture of where I stand with reading poetry today. I was actually raised on a lot of poetry because I went to a school called the Waldorf School from like preschool through middle school, and they put a lot of emphasis on memorizing poems and reciting them aloud. I think this is actually why I prefer spoken poetry, or I prefer listening to poems read aloud than reading them silently in book form. At home, I didn't read that much poetry, though I did get into some kind of more nursery rhyme, children's nonsense poetry stuff, and one book that I know I read a lot with my grandmother was Flower Fairies of the Spring by Cicely Mary Barker. This is just a really beautiful little book. You get all of these beautiful illustrations of little flower fairies and then an accompanying poem. Then when I was a little bit older and I could read for myself, I was gifted several Shel Silverstein books. So I have A Light in the Attic, which has lost its dust jacket, and then Falling Up. I remember really being intrigued by Shel Silverstein. For one, I thought his picture was terrifying. Like, I thought he looked like a very scary person. But his poetry is really funny. It always made me laugh out loud, and I remember just flipping through these books over and over when I was young. I also remember being very scared of his drawings and not actually allowing my parents to keep these books in my bedroom because for some reason I was convinced that his creepy little drawings were going to come to life at night. When I was between the ages of 10 and 12, my mom gave me my first kind of proper poetry collection, and that was this selected poems of Robert Frost. Now, Robert Frost is a poet my mom really enjoys, and he's kind of known as an American pastoral poet. Going for water. The well was dry beside the door, and so he went with pail and can across the fields behind the house to seek the brook if it still ran. He wrote during the 20th century, and a lot of his work is focused on farm life, on kind of pastoral countryside life, and it's, to use a Kate Howe word, it's definitely cozy poetry. It's very simple and yet kind of heartwarming at the same time. I do still read Robert Frost from time to time, though I haven't finished either of my collections. I have this one and then this really beautiful Everyman's Pocket Library edition, which I just... It's not showing up on camera, but it's really pretty, I promise you. So that was young, innocent, unjaded Marissa reading poetry for fun, and then high school happened. For the most part, my poetry education in high school centered around looking at the poem as a technical thing and really trying to figure out meter, verse, rhyme scheme, like all this technical gobbledygook that, one, I don't remember, and two, that kind of put me off poetry after school. He fumbles at your soul as players at the keys. Before they drop full music on, he stuns you by degrees. So Emily Dickinson is a poet I think every single American high school student has had to read at least a little bit of, and I have this massive copy that my brother read out of when he was in high school. And I honestly can't tell you whether I will ever go back to this or not. I think she is more of a fascinating figure to me than I am interested in her poetry, but this is also on my shelves. In high school, I also read selections out of this massive Penguin book of romantic poetry for an AP English course. I think this volume here was what scared me off poetry. If you look at my notes on this one poem, just look what we were doing in class. Like, there's an attempt at figuring out meter here. I'm looking at specific words. I'm looking at rhyme scheme. It just... I'm not actually sure why I've kept this. I think I like that, again, it's a collection of a massive selection of poetry, and so I have it at my disposal should I want to pick it up, but I do think that this really was where I got frightened off poetry. I celebrate myself, and what I assume you shall assume, for every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. I loaf and invite my soul, I lean and loaf at my ease, observing a spear of summer grass. The one poem in high school that we read that I definitely love and still reread to this day is Walt Whitman's Song of Myself. Now, Walt Whitman is considered the quintessential American poet. He was the first American poet to say, screw this rhyming thing, screw specific meter, I'm gonna do whatever the heck I want because poetry is free expression. Song of Myself is genuinely a poem that I have reread over and over because for me it's really uplifting. It's a poem about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a man in relation to the rest of the world and especially in relation to nature, what it means to be a citizen and especially what it means to be a citizen of the United States. When I got to college and we got to pick our own classes, I was really good at avoiding classes where they were going to be teaching poetry. However, I did take one class on contemporary American fiction and didn't realize that half the syllabus was in fact poetry, so that did happen. I've actually given away most of those books because I know I will not go back to them, but I did save two of them here, and the first one of those is The Palace of Contemplating Departure by Brynn Saito. In addition to the fact that Brynn Saito is an Asian American poet, and you guys know I'm interested in Asian American literature, I really held on to this because the imagery is quite striking and really quite beautiful. She does some more, I guess, like traditional style poems, but then she also has some poems in here that I think could be considered prose poetry, and I wanted to just read one to you guys that really stuck out to me. Alma, 1942. To board the train without suspicion, I told the man I was Chinese. Can you believe it? You never had to lie to survive, now, do you? So what will you do with your curious pen and your questions like daggers, slicing through the ripe heat of the merciless summer, tearing the grapes from the vine till they drop like a satchel of dead knuckles on dead earth? To begin, they gave us one army blanket and one army cot, no doors on the bathroom stalls and no stoves for heat, only mouthfuls of dust and the sight of a mountain in the barbed distance where the wind waited like a tired sniper. Denying what you love is like sanding your heart with a pumice stone, and the stone is on fire, and there's no speaking aloud, please, and no singing. You'll see it for yourself when you go there roving, with your questions for the barracks like a hungry ghost. And then the last thing I have here is Bob Hickok's Words for Empty and Words for Full, and I saved this because Bob Hickok is a very issue-driven poet. My sister's out of work and my brother's out of work and my other brother's out of work. These are facts available over the phone or in person, just as now. 3 clouds travel north, one above another, smallish, amoeba-shaped, and the bottom cloud just died, and the 2 top have joined forces and left me to fend for myself under a new sky. Bob Hickok is an American poet, and in this collection he definitely is talking on contemporary issues. He talks about school shootings and violence in general. He talks about what it means to be a country at war and what that does to its citizens. So that is the poetry that I have on my shelves, and it's not a lot because, like I said, I'm not confident in my ability to read poetry, but it's something I would really like to explore more in the coming year. Now, the reason why I made this video is that I recently discovered a, I guess, spoken word poet named Richard Cabral. Now, Richard Cabral might be better known as an actor. He is currently on the show Lethal Weapon on Fox, which is where I discovered him. He was also nominated for an Emmy for his performance in ABC's show American Crime in 2015. Richard Cabral kind of has an interesting story. He is a former gang member and was actually incarcerated for an attempted murder and has kind of turned his life around through the power of art and storytelling. I'm kind of low-key obsessed with Cabral at the moment, so I realize that he won't be everybody's cup of tea, but I will link a couple of videos down below. One is just a poem that he is reading aloud that is very intense, and you really feel his rap background. You feel that like rhythmic quality in his poetry. Then the other link will be for what I believe is the opening monologue of a one-man show that he did this past spring, where he just told his life story through poetry. And I just think he's really inspiring, and he's made me want to look more into poetry and find poetry that relates to me more. So hopefully you guys will enjoy those clips if you choose to watch them. Just a heads up, they are not safe for work. Like I said, I really love poetry read aloud, and through Cabral I'm kind of rediscovering this world of spoken word poetry and slam poetry, and I would ask you guys that if you have any recommendations for poets you think I would like based on what I have shared here, please recommend them to me in the comments below. And with that, that is the end of today's video, so thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you will stay tuned for another Vlogmas video tomorrow, and I will see you then. Bye!